This is the final lesson of your Class 3 rowing school. And what I want to talk about in this lesson is pushing and tracking and running a heavier boat. But before I do, I just want to focus on what we've covered for a few days, which is pulling, which is going slower than the current. And we've hammered this so hard because we want this to be your default. We want this if you're nervous or if there's a hazard, we want you to default to this, and we want you to know that you can run all these rapids with a pull. We want you very comfortable with that. We've used the terms pivot and pull or pull from the line to danger. And the idea is if there's a hazard like a rock, something in the way, something dangerous, think about a line going to that thing, and we're gonna pivot our boat and pull away from it. And by pulling away from it, that's how we slow the river down and we ideally avoid this obstacle. This is a very defensive way to boat. This is a very responsible way to boat. But we also recognize that there's also a maneuver called pushing that we purposely have held back with you from. We haven't covered it that much, but I want to talk about it because it's valuable as you go out and do more and more boating. And the idea, instead of pivoting and pulling, is that you pivot and you try pushing. And now you're using your weaker muscles because it's just your pecs instead of your back and your triceps. And also, you're also very exposed. If you don't make that move and you're pushing, you're going to hit the rock or the obstacle sideways. You're also going faster than the current. So pulling, you're going slower than the current, so there's more time. Now you're going faster than the current by pushing, and things happen more quickly, so your timing has to be perfect. If you're pulling and you hit the obstacle, you hit it with your bow generally and bounce off. But if you're pushing and don't make it, you hit it sideways. This is when you flip. This is when you wrap. This is when you have problems. And what we see a lot of times is people learning to push. They push and they push. They're not making it. They realize that they don't make it. They then pivot to try to pull off that thing. The same thing can happen to eddy. Like if you're trying to push into an eddy, we see people all the time missing eddies by pushing. They then aren't going to make it. They turn around, pivot around, and then pull to shore. Again, this pulling on the oars, pivot and pulling should be our default way to go. But there's some reasons we might want to push. And the big one is tracking. So the idea of tracking is as your boat gets heavier, your boat tends to go where it wants to go. In the Class 3 rowing school, you probably had one of our lighter boats, so you couldn't really feel tracking, you couldn't really see tracking. But once you start putting more and more weight in there, bags, stoves, food, people, whatever you're carrying, and your boat gets heavier, it's gonna wanna track. Which basically, like I said, means when you point it somewhere, it's gonna generally want to go there. And so when you're pulling, let's say you're pulling away from this, it wants to go that way and you're pulling, you're fighting that tracking. It takes quite a bit of energy to overcome that tracking. And so pivoting and pulling is still important for heavy boats, for gear boats, when boats track. It's just a bit harder to pivot and pull. And if you point the boat and push a little bit, it might track better over there. It's another option. One's not better than the other. It's just a different option. And so I just want to introduce the idea that you can push moves, that the more weight that's in the boat, the more it's going to want to go in that direction. It's going to track that direction. But the downsides are things are happening really fast. You're going faster than the current. You're exposed to a rock because you'll probably hit it sideways if you don't make it. And these are your weaker muscles. And so in this course, we created pulling as your foundational skill. And hopefully you feel really comfortable with that. I know that when you go out boating in the real world, you're going to start pushing on your own. And this is something you will learn over time the more you boat to get better and better at pushing. So you have both of these things in your skill set. So I want to finish up this video by saying one's not better than the other. There are two different techniques. We focused on this in the course so that you could have pulling be your foundational thing because it's very defensive, very responsible. We know over time you're going to start learning pushing and tracking the more you boat, and that's great. And at some point you'll have both skills and be able to do them equally. Anyway, thanks for listening to me babble on for a while. Thanks for joining us in the Class 3 Rowing School. I hope I get to see you out there on the river somewhere, sometime.